Good evening, CFC family. Great to see you on this Wednesday night for Hub Night. Thank you for joining us. I have a very special guest with me today, Cassandra Lindo. Casey, how are you?
I am great. How are you, Daniel?
You don't sound great.
I am so great.
All right. We're going to dive in today to John chapter 15. So if you don't mind opening up with us today, we're going to be in John 15, and we'll be reading from the NLT. All right, the New Living Translation. So let's dive in. Casey, you want to take us off?
Sure. It says, I am the true grapevine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit, so they will produce even more. You have already been pruned and purified by the message I have given you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. Yes, I am the vine. You are the branches. Those who remain in me, and I in them, will produce much fruit, for apart from me you can do nothing. Anyone who does not remain in me is thrown away like a useless branch and withers. Such branches are gathered into a pile to be burned. But if you remain in me, and my words remain in you, you may ask for anything you want, and it will be granted. When you produce much fruit, you are my true disciples. This brings great glory to my Father.
Awesome. So in verses 1 through 8, this is all Jesus talking. You can see, if you got the Bible in front of you, you can see all the red letters, right? Red letters means very important. Jesus is talking here, so pay close attention. So you see that Jesus is kind of comparing himself to the vine, and he's comparing us to branches. Again, Jesus tends to use a lot of analogies when he speaks. And you got to think about, and I believe that Dan Boulay, a while back, a few months ago in a Hub Night, had talked about how Jesus really knew who he was speaking to. He knew his audience. So he knew that he was talking to construction workers, right? He knew that he was talking to gardeners. Right. And so he used a lot of references that could relate to the people he was talking to. Remember, a lot of them were uneducated. Right. Educated was for the wealthy class. They're the ones who could afford school because it was really expensive. I mean, you had to live by trade back then. Right. You couldn't just go to the grocery market and go buy groceries. People actually just had to farm for themselves and survive by themselves through the goods that they produced. And a lot of it was a trade-based economy. So I could build you a boat. You give me, a winter's worth of lettuce, and we'll call it a great deal, right? I mean, I wouldn't take the deal because I can't stand lettuce. Right? I know you wouldn't take the deal because all you eat is pizza and chicken tenders. But, so it was very much a trade and barter culture. So Jesus knew he was talking to, and he's going to use this analogy of vines and branches to talk about the nature of the relationship of mankind to him. Casey, what are some of your takeaways from verses 1 through 8 when Jesus says that I'm the vine and you are the branches?
I think one of the verses that really just hits home is verse 7. It says, but if you remain in me and my words remain in you, you may ask for anything you want and it will be granted. And so sometimes, especially as new believers, we're like, oh, okay, if I have Jesus, anything that I want will be granted.
$1 million.
No, not necessarily, because if we are in his word and his word remains in us, then our values will align with his. And so what we want will only align with what God has for us. So I think that just really stuck out to me.
That's really, really good. I mean, I think so many times, and especially now, we talk about a lot here too, the prosperity movement that, you don't just get saved so God will give you, bags of cash and you can just run with it. If you're coming to Jesus with the idea that he's just going to give you tons of stuff, I mean, then you should go believe in Santa Claus because Jesus isn't for you. All right. Because we'll see later on in the chapter that what Jesus actually tells us about what he promises us and how we will be treated. And I can tell you that it's not bags of cash. So you might want to just tune off now if you don't like that answer, because Casey made a really great point. If we really truly love Jesus and know Jesus. And it says in 7, if you remain in me and my words remain in you. So if we actually absorb his message, we'll realize that we're not here for riches and for money and for glory, but we're here to exalt Jesus. We're here to exalt the Lord on earth. I mean, he gives us the Great Commission, and he tells us to go and make disciples of all nations, right? Preaching his gospel, baptizing in his name. And that has nothing to do with us. We're just the carriers of the message, but the message always points back and gives back glory to the Father. And I think that was a really, really, really great point that you made. And Jesus says, there's going to be evidence to know that you're my disciples.
Right.
And in verse 8, you see that. When you produce much fruit, you are my true disciples, because this brings great glory to the Father. So when we are fulfilling our Great Commission calling, we are really living out the life of true discipleship. We are acting like true disciples. We are being true disciples. And in that, we kind of talk about it a lot in our leadership meetings too, is that, our individual testimonies make up the collective testimonies of the church,
Yep.
right? And the church's mission is to bring glory to the Father. So if our individual testimonies aren't aligning with the Great Commission and with the gospel, then we're making the church's testimony a really hypocritical one. And we see this a lot of the times. And in talking to a lot of unbelievers, their biggest struggle is that how can I believe in God if Christians are a bunch of hypocrites?
Right. And I think in verse 6 too, at least the version that we're reading, the NLT, it goes on to say that we're like a useless branch that withers. So just the word useless kind of hurts. It's like, ouch, if we're not bringing true disciples to the church and producing fruit, then we're useless. And it hurts, but at the same time, it makes you reevaluate kind of where you're at and kind of your walk with Christ as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think about my grandfather all the time, who he just toils in his garden, and he's done it for years. He's up at like 5 a.m, and he's out there. I can't even bring myself to wake up to go to work at 5 a.m, and he's doing a leisure activity,
Not even at 7.
working at the garden. Hey, settle down, all right? Casey and I work together, and she always is making fun of me for maybe my late tendencies, but we won't say that too much. Listen, all right? But my grandfather's in the garden at 5 a.m, and that is hard work and dedication. But in order to get fruit to be produced, he's got to be out there. Right. He's got to be pruning. He's got to be cutting off the branches that are dead and that are useless, because those branches are going to suck up water, and they're just going to take away from the branches that actually are bringing life and being fruitful. So it's really important that, we are kind of doing the same thing, that we are producing and that we are useful to the kingdom.
And something that I like that you said is, like, he actually has to do something. Like, there's an action there. It's not just going to happen. Sometimes as a church, we kind of just sit back and we're like, okay, God, it's your turn to move. Yeah. And he's calling us to serve and to bring, to bear fruit, right? So he wants us to be able to disciple one another and be able to build up disciples to then go on and multiply. So I think that's just important, the whole action behind it.
Well, yeah.
We can't just sit still.
Definitely. I mean, I think in very many ways, the ball's in our court, and it's, what are we going to do with it? Right. What are we going to do with what we've been given and what we've been instructed to do? We have clear instructions. We know the mission. We know what we're supposed to be doing. So are we doing it?
Right.
And if we're not, why aren't we? It causes you to kind of reflect and reevaluate the condition of your heart, really. Right. Let's go down. Let's read verses 9 through 17 and transition here. So I have loved you even as the Father has loved me. Remain in my love. When you obey my commandments, you remain in my love, just as I obey my Father's commandments and remain in his love. I have told you these things so that you will be filled with my joy. Yes, your joy will overflow. This is my commandment. Love each other in the same way I have loved you. There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends. If you do what I command, I no longer call you slaves, because a master doesn't confide in his slaves. Now you are my friends, since I have told you everything the Father has told me. You didn't choose me, I chose you. I appointed you to go and produce lasting fruit, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask for using my name. This is my command: love each other. That's a really good chunk of verses there. What are some takeaways that you see in those verses, Case?
I think verse 12, and it's kind of a cliche, love each other the same way I have loved you. And sometimes that's hard, right? And it doesn't just specify, your friends or anything. And although he does call us friends, he just says love each other, and that's going on to everyone.
Yes.
So oftentimes that's hard, especially when, people are getting on your nerves, and it's like, I'm supposed to love you, but how do I love you?
Take your own advice, Casey. We're talking about each other. We drive each other crazy all the time.
So definitely conviction coming from verse 12 for sure.
Oh, man. Yeah, I know. And this, he says, this is my commandment. So this is my suggestion. Mm-hmm. This is what I would recommend. This is what I think you should do. He's saying,
do this.
This is my commandment. Do this. Mm-hmm. Love each other the way that I have loved you. And if you have experienced Jesus' love, if you've experienced that grace and that peace, that overwhelming, surpassing peace that you get when you come to know and love Jesus, I mean, that is a huge call to love others the way that Christ loves us. Are we bringing peace to others?
Right.
Are we bringing joy to others?
That's good.
Are we doing the things that Christ would do for us, for others? And so that really causes into question, where is your heart? Where are our motives? And like you said, it's not always with the people that are easy to love. We're supposed to go beyond that. Jesus doesn't limit his love to a certain group of people.
Right.
Jesus has called every single one of us and said, my love is open for you. My love is open for you. And ask and you shall receive. You want my love, you can have it.
Right.
You can have it right now. Just as long as you abide in me. Simple. Right. Simple. And so, you look at love in that sense, it's like we should be loving one another. And in our world right now, the year of 2020, the year of now going into 2021, love and kindness is something that seems to be a fleeting thing in our world. Right. More and more is there hatred, and is there division, and is there anger and bitterness, and it's so deeply rooted. But God is saying that's not how I operate in my kingdom. Right. My kingdom is built on the foundation of love.
Yeah. And I think verse 16 too, it says, "You didn't choose me, I chose you." But before that it says, "Now you are my friends." So just thinking, would you choose a friend like yourself? If you were Jesus, would you choose a friend like yourself?
Ouch.
Probably not. And to go on and say, I could consider you my slaves, but I don't. I consider you my friend.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was powerful, that, that kind of love. Being able to look far beyond any of our mistakes, any of our flaws, and being able to still choose that person. Yeah.
And I mean, you think about, it was our sin that put Jesus on the cross, yet he calls us friend.
Right.
Granted, we weren't there saying, crucify him, but in spirit, our sin was on his back and on his shoulders, and it was nailed to the cross. So we kind of were those people saying, crucify him. And I'm sure if we were there, we would have screamed it too, because even the disciples who had spent all this time with him, they still they were quiet. They weren't screaming crucify him, but they were silent. And when they were asked, Peter denied him. Peter denied him three times, just like Jesus had prophesied and predicted. So, you look at that, he calls us friends regardless of how many times we mess up, or, regardless of our sin, regardless of, no matter if we turn our back on him, he gives us an opportunity to run back to him, and he calls us friend. He doesn't call us slave. He doesn't call us enemy. He calls us friend, and he loves us. And he's demonstrated that by going to the cross for us. And he also demonstrates it by leaving us his word.
Right.
These are clear instructions.
Yeah.
I mean, just having John 15, if we could master the principles established in John 15, our world would be a totally different place.
Yep.
If the church, and not Conquerors for Christ, the church universal understood the concepts in John chapter 15,
That's good.
our world would look entirely different. Because if we actually applied these principles, who could deny Christ?
Right.
Who could deny Christ? You know, it's just there's some really great commandments in here. I think 9 through 17, just the commandments. You know, Jesus talks about, I obeyed my commandments. He's not. I obeyed my Father's commandments. I'm sorry. That's in verse 10. You know, he's not asking us to do something he hasn't already done.
Right.
He's saying, I came to earth. I obeyed my Father's commandments. Even though he's one with God and it's his commandments he's following.
Right.
You know, he could have just come here and just called it a day, not lived as a God instead of man and done his own thing. But instead he came here, lived as a man, obeyed his Father's commandments. And he's saying, you know, now I'm asking you to do the same. And I'm not asking you to do something I haven't done myself. You know, I loved my enemies. So love your enemies. You know, love like I have loved you. Love like the Father has loved us, right? Obey the commands my Father has given, and thus, you know, obey my commandments as well, knowing that they also flow from the Father. So it's just there's a lot of good stuff in here. And, you know, going on, you know, talking about our world, talking about hatred and love and all that. The next title, at least in the NLT, of the next group of verses, 18 through 27, it's called The World's Hatred. And that's kind of funny there, right? The world's hatred.
Yeah.
So let's kind of look at this. Let's read verses 18 through 27. Do you mind reading that?
No. It says, if the world hates you, remember that it hated me first. The world would love you as one of its own if you belonged to it, but you are no longer a part of the world. I chose you to come out of the world, so it hates you. Do you remember what I told you? A slave is not greater than the master. Since they persecuted me, naturally they will persecute you. And if they had listened to me, they would listen to you. They will do all of this to you because of me, for they have rejected the one who sent me. They would not be guilty if I had not come and spoken to them. But now they have no excuse for their sin. Anyone who hates me also hates my Father. If I hadn't done such miraculous signs among them that no one else could do, they would not be guilty. But as it is, they have seen everything I did, yet they still hate me and my Father. This fulfills what is written in their scriptures. They hated me without cause. But I will send you the Advocate, the Spirit of truth. He will come to you from the Father and will testify all about me. And you must also testify about me, because you have been with me from the beginning of my ministry.
That's good. So, you know, just looking at verses 18 through 25, and I told you we would get to the part later, you know, that God doesn't, you know, Jesus doesn't promise money bags. Yep. You know, it's verse 21 where he's like, they will do all of this to you because of me, for they have rejected the one who sent me. You know, and in the previous verses, he's talking about, in verse 20, do you remember what I told you? A slave is not greater than their master. So since they persecuted me, naturally they will persecute you. And if they had listened to me, they would listen to you. And, you know, talking about money bags, you know, Jesus doesn't promise money bags, but he does say, since they persecuted me, guess what? They're going to also persecute you. And that's just a natural result of sharing the gospel message sometimes. And in our world where we're realizing that the world is becoming more and more hostile against this message. You know, sometimes, you know, you just mentioned that you're a Christian and it's like, don't judge me. Don't judge me. It's like, no, I'm not. It's not my job to judge you.
Right.
I've been called to love you.
Yep.
You know, and I think that that Christians have kind of gotten this bad MO, if you will, because of the fact that there are these crazy groups of Christians that are so judgy and say that you're going to hell, you're going to hell, you're going to hell. And that is a reality. People, yes, will go to hell. If you don't accept Christ, the natural result is hell, and we don't sugarcoat that.
Right.
But it's not my job to tell you you're going to hell. It's my job to love you and to tell you that God has come to earth and has given you an opportunity for redemption, right? If you should only believe in him and trust in him, then you shall have eternal life.
Right.
Go for it.
I think that too, what he's saying in verse 18, he's like, if the world hates you, remember that they hated me first. Like he's saying, don't take it personal almost.
Yeah.
He was like, it's a result of what happens from following me. So oftentimes though, when people don't accept us, and even from the world, if you're out at work or school or anything like that, when people kind of shut down with you, you take it personally and you're like, oh, that hurts. Why? But it's just a natural occurrence, and it's the result of following Christ. And so I think he's saying that, you know, it's okay. It's okay to be rejected by the world because you belong to him.
Yeah. And in 21, going back to that, it says, for they have rejected the one who sent me. Right? So they're not rejecting you per se. They're rejecting the God in you.
Right. Exactly.
You know, and we know that in the world there are going to be some people who unfortunately don't accept God and instead reject God. And, you know, we leave that for God to know.
Right.
You know, it's not our job to know who goes to heaven, who goes to hell. You know, our Great Commission, our mission was very clear. Go forth and make disciples. It doesn't say go forth and judge people. It doesn't say go forth and tell people they're going to hell, or go forth and tell people that they're going to heaven, or go forth and tell people that there's great money and riches in my kingdom, and if they only come to me, then they'll have it all. You know, it doesn't say that. We've been given a clear message, and that is to go forth and make disciples, preach my gospel, baptize in my name. And, you know, they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting the God in you.
And I think in like 22 through 24, they basically say like, they rejected me because of what I did, because I stuck and I followed my Father. So it's like, if we didn't follow the Father, then of course they would be fine with us. But that's the one thing that they have wrong.
Yeah.
So I just found that rather interesting. It's like, if you start to stray off, you'll almost notice more of an acceptance from them. Yeah. And it's like, oh, that's interesting. What am I doing wrong now?
Yeah.
But it feels right because it's like, wow, I'm actually being accepted.
Yeah.
So definitely just staying true to that vine and making sure that, you know, you don't stray and you don't become a lost branch.
Well, and I think it's important, too, because I think we can kind of get churchy with this. And we can say, well, I'm clearly not supposed to dine with sinners and, you know, to go and hang out with these people and to be welcomed by them. But that's not entirely true either. We can't live as a church. We can't live in extremes, right? So Jesus dined with sinners. That's why the Pharisees couldn't stand him. They couldn't stand him because he went against the norm. All right. Remember, the Jewish culture, it was all about cleanliness. It was all about you had to purify yourself before God and make sure that you were clean and that you were righteous and that you were holy. And the Pharisees took that to a whole nother extreme. And they wouldn't even identify with the sinner. They wouldn't even come close to him. They didn't want to go close to the leper. They didn't want to deal with them. And now you have Jesus who's going and he's touching the leper. He's going and he's hanging out with sinners, dining with them, entering their homes, and they're like, what in the world is going on? It's an upside down message. And so, you know, in these chapters, it's not saying to avoid the world. It's not saying to hate them. You know, it's saying to love them and to continue to pursue relationships with them, even though they reject you. Remember, they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting the God in you. And so you can still have a relationship with people. I mean, we can disagree, and we disagree on a lot of things, Casey, right? But I still love the heck out of you, right? And you love me, hopefully?
I guess.
All right, good. You know, so here we are, you know, we're thinking that we can't continue to pursue relationships with people, but you know, they're just rejecting the God portion of us. They're not rejecting us entirely. And if we continue to live out our life and love people and continue to preach our gospel through word and through action, because those things have to align. Our words and our actions have to align, because if they don't, our testimony is hypocritical, right? And so knowing those things align, that, you know, the seeds that you plant, they won't come back void, you know? And we see that in verses 26 and 27, we're left with just a really kind of parting few words here. But I will send you the advocate, the Spirit of truth. He will come to you from the Father and will testify all about me. And you must also testify about me because you have been with me from the beginning of my ministry. So, he ends this chapter with saying that, Jesus is sending us an advocate, which is the Holy Spirit in us. And, what I get from these verses is that, Jesus was empowered by the Spirit. Mm-hmm. And so when he sends his Spirit to us, it's giving us empowerment to do the same mission and fulfill the same things that Jesus did on earth. And I mean, it even says in the word that you will do greater things. With the Spirit empowering you will do greater things than I have done in the world. And I think sometimes we operate like that's not true as a church. As the global church, we operate like that's not true. Like there aren't greater things to be done. And that's not to diminish what Jesus has done and make us gods ourselves. That's not what we're saying at all. But God, Jesus is saying that we have a job to do, and that job is so important. And what we have to do on earth is so important that it really will be greater works and greater things. I think
he's almost saying that too. He's like, hang tight. He's like, you must also testify all about me. And so he's kind of like, hang in there, stay with me here because you've been with me since the beginning. Yeah. And so, yeah.
And we may not feel like we were with Jesus since the beginning of his ministry, but we weren't there in person, but we're reading the word. And so you get to see the development of Jesus' ministry. And we've been there. We got to see his ministry unfold, and we know so much more. We have access to this Bible all the time. These people didn't really have access to a written Bible. Mm-hmm. A lot of the early church didn't have early Bibles. There weren't printing presses that were printing out Bibles. There weren't iPads and tablets and phones where you could just pull up whatever version you wanted. Scripture was hard to come by, so you really had to go by hearing and by doing and seeing people's actions lived out, and that was the gospel on display. So I think that there's a lot to pull from this chapter, and I'm so glad we got to study this today. Casey, thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks, Dan.
Really appreciate it.
Me.
Yeah, it was totally awesome. I had a good time.
It was.
Yeah. Well, church, thank you for joining us tonight on this Hub Night. Stay tuned. There will be worship following right after in this stream. Make sure that you sign up for Connect groups. We're so excited to see those launching. New season, this winter season's coming up. So get signed up. Download the new Church Center app. Just go to your app store and type in Church Center. Sign up. Search Conquerors for Christ, and this is my church, and you'll see all our groups on there. Online giving is on there. We have access to our live streams and prayer requests. So a lot of great features in our new app, and it's also how you'll plug in for signups for Connect groups. So we're just super excited about that new app and about Connect groups. So get plugged in on there, and we are so excited. We will see you on Sunday. God bless.
Father of kindness, you have poured out grace. You brought me out of darkness, you fill me with peace. Giver of mercy, you're my help in time of need. Lord, I can't help but sing. Faithful you are, faithful forever you will be. Faithful you are, and all your promises are yes and amen. And all your promises are yes and amen. ashes you have broken every curse. Blessed Redeemer, you have set this captive free. Lord, I can't help but sing. Faithful you are, faithful forever you will be. Faithful you are, and all your promises are yes and amen. And all your promises are yes and amen. Faithful you are, faithful forever you will be. Faithful you are, and all your promises are yes and amen. And all your promises are yes and amen. And I will rest in your promises. My confidence is your faithfulness. I will rest in your promises. My confidence is your faithfulness. And I will rest in your promises. My confidence is your faithfulness. I will rest in your promises. My confidence is your faithfulness. Faithful you are, faithful forever you will be. Faithful you are, and all your promises are yes and amen. And all your promises are yes and amen. Faithful you are, faithful forever you will be. Faithful you are, and all your promises are yes and amen. And all your promises are yes and amen. And all your promises are yes and amen.
God, I look to you. I won't be overwhelmed. Give me vision to see things like you do. God, I look to you. You're where my help comes from. Give me wisdom. You know just what to do. You know just what to do. God, I look to you. I won't be overwhelmed. Give me vision to see things like you do. God, I look to you. You're where my help comes from. high.